My man, Brady Quinn. Yeah. What's happening, babe?
Jonas, long time no talk.
Yep.
And obviously, what happened yesterday? A lot seemed to go on yesterday in my absence.
It's weird. For some reason, your name was trending all over Twitter. I don't know what it was, and I thought, okay, well, could it be like an announcement for Big Noon Kickoff if they announced the schedule, like how many more trips to Columbus, which I'm sure are going to be fun moving forward. Are there going to be? I mean, well, like what's? And then I all of a sudden saw, well, we've got TMZ, we've got Ryan Clark, we've got RG3, we've got you name it, everybody coming out of the woodwork looking for content because they've run through every other angle on every draft prospect that we got. And so you were at the center of the madness that was one of the most hilarious and dumbest situations I've seen, which was only focused on exactly how many people don't listen. They actually don't listen. They just attack and then try and figure out what the hell's going on afterwards.
Yeah, so let me give people some of the backstory to, I guess, what got a lot of attention yesterday, and maybe even the day before, the night before. So a guy by the name of Dove Kleeman, however you pronounce his name, some D-bag, okay? Don't know the guy, never met the guy. He seems to be really concerned that he lost his blue check mark. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about that guy. He took a 1-minute clip, which he posted from a podcast that I do for CBS. And what he did was he took out this one portion of it that he created a misleading headline to create a narrative about CJ Stroud. And then he posted it. And I right away said to him, this is not accurate. You're creating a false narrative of what was said. Not only in the 1-minute clip, if you actually took the time to listen to it, which most people didn't, but even if you listen to our entire conversation during an hour-long podcast. So this all of a sudden catches legs. And then people get wind of whatever Dove Kleeman said, Kleeman, again, however you pronounce it. And from there, we start going into this, I guess, cycle of an agent for CJ Stroud becoming very concerned about it, and David Mulugeta. That's why if you look at a lot of the guys who started chirping about this yesterday, Quandre Diggs, represented by David Mulugeta, Jalen Ramsey, represented by David Mulugeta, CJ Stroud, represented by David Mulugeta. Guy like Ryan Clark, who's in the industry, very close with David Mulugeta. That's not an opinion, that's fact. He's admitted as much. He's had it on his podcast and all that. So if you actually look at what had taken place was, David Mulugeta, the agent for CJ Stroud, appears to be so concerned about CJ Stroud choosing not to go to the Manning Passing Academy that he felt the need to reach out to his clients and try to create some sort of Twitter attack, which for anyone who knows me knows I could give two you-know-whats about Twitter or people's opinion on Twitter. But as you said, all it did was highlight the fact that no one actually even took the time to listen to the 1-minute clip and understand the context of the conversation was I was asked a question as to why could a player like CJ Stroud be dropping at this point in time in the draft process. And so as we've talked about on this show, and I mentioned on the Pick Six podcast, I've been there. I've gone through this. And so I spoke about some of the things that I went through, and I spoke about some of the things that I had heard. Now, some are on the field things, his completion percentage and his numbers versus pressure versus a clean pocket, which again, that doesn't concern me. As I said in the podcast, even in the 1-minute clip, he's the most accurate in this draft class. If there's any concerns about mobility, he kind of alleviated some of those with the way he played versus Georgia. And then you hear people who criticize him about, oh, he plays in this system where he's got first-round wide receivers and all this talent around him. Well, he can't control that. All he can do is do exactly what he's done and put himself in a position to go out and ball out every week, which is exactly what it said in the podcast. But none of those were controversial, right? Until you bring up him deciding not to go to the Manning Passing Academy, which, by the way, the attacks from people like an RG3, dude, I can't wait for your book to come out. I'm so excited about it. And then Ryan Clark, who don't know me, don't know anything about my integrity or anything else that I was as a player, as a person, as an analyst, all of a sudden start taking that as a slight to the character of CJ Stroud. If either one of those two would have taken the time to listen to a 1-minute clip, they would have heard me literally define it as potentially a smokescreen. The fact that I don't care about it, that hasn't been my experience with it. He's been a great young man, a good leader for that team. And I've watched him mature over the past couple of years. All of those, even in a 1-minute clip. But that's the point, is in today's society, we have people who just don't actually care to know what the hell they're talking about. And so here's the unfortunate thing of all of this. CJ Stroud gets brought up in a manner where it doesn't make any sense, because as you and I have talked, have I not mentioned that whole Manning Passing Academy before?
Yes.
It's not a secret, and I'm not going to blow the sources that I've talked to, but I've talked to someone who's directly involved in the Manning Passing Academy. I've talked to people who are a part of ESPN, people who literally reached out yesterday and said, yeah, these other guys don't know what they're talking about. And I've talked to a front office executive about it that said, yeah, apparently someone was upset about it. Not a great look. I mean, those are things people say. Ultimately, does it matter? No. And that's why I said he should be the second quarterback taken, the number 2 overall pick. But no one listens to that. So, we can sit here and try to take shots at other people. That's not my character. If RG3 wants to do that or question things about that, that's his style. If Ryan Clark wants to do that and continue doing that, that's his style. I had a chance to speak to him last night. Very civil conversation. We disagree on one particular thing, because I think he's heard, more from maybe CJ Stroud's side, and I've heard more from other people on the other side of that. And that's fine. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle. But like I said in the beginning, in the end, who cares? If you are basing your decision on whether or not you're taking him off of that, I mean, you've got bigger problems then in your decision-making process to determine how you go about finding your quarterback.
The part that's so funny about it all is that you talked about this on the air here, a month and a half ago? Like, you mentioned this a month and a half ago, and it was the same context. We were having discussions about what could be the knock on either of these guys, and the conversation was about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. For Bryce Young, everybody knew what it was. Well, it was his size. For CJ Stroud, all you did was throw out, maybe there's a feeling that he might have blown off the Manning Passing Academy and the night before and didn't show up, and maybe we had that conversation. In fact, we've had that conversation on this show twice, just in talking about all the other angles of this. And the point being, we're at the point in the draft process where we've seen all the tape, we've got all the measurables. Now it's find a flaw with everybody that's a prospect. And all you did was answer a question, a what if. Like, hey, it would be the same thing that we've heard about Will Levis. Hey, why is Will Levis potentially dropping in the draft? Well, he's too muscular. We talked about that as well, too. And if I'm not mistaken, you had CJ Stroud winning the Heisman, did you not? Wasn't he your pick?
Yeah.
So, like, this idea that these guys are coming out of the woodwork and they're taking shots and talking about just how bad the take was, and he's not researched, he doesn't know anything. I got news for you, okay? There's not a single person at ESPN who has been on site and covered more CJ Stroud games over the past couple of years than Brady Quinn. That's not a take. That's not an opinion. That 100% is a fact. Big Noon Kickoff is there all the time. You're from the area. Everybody, like, the idea that you don't know what you're talking about and have no intel on CJ Stroud and aren't complimentary to what he is as a football player, all you did was answer a question about what could be the opinion from others on CJ Stroud. That's it. And then everybody got all super sensitive about it. And really what I think everybody at ESPN, those guys specifically, ought to cut you a check and thank you for giving them some content, because apparently they ran out of material. All that did was highlight everything that's wrong with social media. And you and I are on the same page. We've talked about this for a long time. If I didn't work in radio, I wouldn't have a Twitter. Because I think all of it is a giant professional wrestling organization. Everybody's full of crap. Everybody's me. It's all a big hype train for themselves or for buddies of themselves, and it's a bunch of biased opinions. Yesterday was the full highlight of everything wrong with it. You got mob mentality, you've got laziness, and you got fake outrage. That's Twitter. And that was highlighted by everybody who jumped in with a take, and then they're taking shots at you and your integrity. You could cost him millions. I got news for you. Do you think the Houston Texans, sitting at 2, are on the verge of calling CJ Stroud to negotiate millions upon millions of dollars of wealth that's going to last his family for generations, and then hung up the phone mid-dial and said, hold on a second, there was an opinion that came out. Somebody answered a question about why he could be falling. On further review, upon further review, we're going to go ahead and take Will Anderson instead. We feel like that's a bit... Just the idea that any of this matters long-term is crazy to me. And that's everything that played out yesterday is exactly why so many people are realizing why everybody's full of crap when it comes to social media. The whole thing was a joke.
I think that's part of it. And look, we joke about things at times when we bring up our things racist and all that stuff. That's the ugly part of this too, is people start to bring race into the conversation. Like, I'm like, what does that have to do at all? And I think, my I guess feelings about how people started to then try to attack me was more in regards to, well, it's the evaluation, the character, the way you're demeaning the character. I'm like, how is that the meaning of the character? I literally just told you my experience with the young man and how much praise I have towards him. Now, ultimately, if I am hearing from a front office executive that they are bothered by it, or other people within the industry, and it happened, then they say, yeah, maybe it bothered a couple people. Okay, that was a decision that he made. Last time I checked, wasn't Bryce Young there? Wasn't Anthony Richardson there? Weren't other quarterbacks there? They chose to go. He didn't, okay? He's got to answer for that. That's part of this whole process. And in the end, as you said, it doesn't matter. Nick Caserio or D'Amico Ryans, whoever's taking him at 2, whoever would trade up to take him at 3 with the Cardinals, or 4 if it was Indianapolis, they are not consulting with me. If it bothers them, it bothers them. And that's something that him and his agent have to figure out how to go about doing. But trying to attack me and my integrity, all right? Like, David Mulugeta has played this card before. He really has. He just gets a lot of his players that he represents, and he tries to have them send out a bunch of tweets, and they try to get that mob mentality. Here's a news flash for David. I know a lot of agents within Athletes First, all right? A lot of guys who are up at the top. I could care less. He's a great agent. He's done a tremendous job for his players. I don't care about Twitter. And so that's what you have to understand, is this all came about. The whole origin of this was some D-bag on Twitter who literally crafted this narrative to create a stir, and then he just steps back and watches the chaos happen. And then you've got an agent who's then orchestrating and pulling strings all behind it. That is the truth to all this. Like, if you're wondering why this whole thing got as wild and crazy as it did, that's why. Like, that's what's happening behind the scenes. And it's nuts. It blows my mind that anyone would literally put that much into Twitter. And then obviously, again, I don't look through mentions and everything else. I've told you that before, because there's no point, because I'd like to believe in the good in people. And that's one of the reasons why I called Ryan Clark last night. And like I said, we have a civil conversation, kind of discuss through, obviously the process of how you go about talking about subjects on air and everything else. And came to a civil disagreement, but just said, hey, all right, man, well, best of luck, respect moving forward. But you have to understand this too, is, it wasn't like I've ever attacked, especially on Twitter, an analyst for how they've conducted themselves or handled themselves. That was what he did. That was what RG3 did. That was what came, motivated back to what an agent was pushing them to do.
I mean, can you imagine? There's been some speculation whether or not Nick Caserio, the GM for the Texans, is going to be with the team after the draft. Let me tell you how for sure he won't be with the team after the draft. If it gets out that they were on the verge of drafting CJ Stroud and he put the phone down and said, hold on a second, what did Dove Kleiman just tweet? Yeah, no, not interested. Can we trade back a few spots and not have a quarterback going into next year? Like that's where we're at when it comes to the logic behind all this stuff. I don't. Yeah, and I don't know who Dove Kleiman is. I actually had a theory on this. I don't know if you buy into this or not, but I actually had a theory. Maybe because I know you were very concerned about AI. I don't know that anybody's ever actually seen Dove Kleiman. So maybe he actually is like artificial intelligence. Like he's an artificial intelligence.
He's a bot.
Like a bot or something like that. That could be a
maybe
possibility.
Maybe he's one of Elon Musk's creations. Which, by the way, at this point, I think that's the only reason I even have Twitter. Is just like even professionally, like as an analyst, I would love to get rid of it, but I do find it intriguing what Elon Musk tweets out.
He's hilarious.
And what he chooses to say.
He's hilarious.
So
he's hilarious.
He is, and he's like appointment Twitter. If you need to follow someone,
let me tell you something. Elon Musk paid. What did he pay for Twitter? Was it $40 billion or $40 million?
$44 billion.
All right,
$44 billion.
Elon Musk paid $44 billion to troll trolls. That's what he did. I don't even know if he's going to get his return on investment because everybody's panicking over their blue check marks going away for $8 a month. But he paid $44 billion to troll a bunch of trolls in a professional wrestling organization known as Twitter. So good for him. That's called funny money. That's called, I got a little bit to play with, so let me throw it out there. Yeah, that was wild, man. And by the way, if Ryan Clark is really insulted by you calling him bub, you should see some of the stuff he calls me on private text messages, Ryan Clark. All right, if that's going to insult you, you can't hang, man. That's rookie league stuff. That's high A ball stuff. You're not ready for double, triple A, or even the major leagues at that point. If that insults you, being called bub on the air or being called bub on Twitter is offensive to you. That was the other part of it that I thought was fantastic. So,
well, bub to me can be a term of endearment.
Yes.
The way I grew up,
Great.
People called me Bubby. My dad used to call me Bubby, and there was a Bubby Brister who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
So I always would watch, Bubby, whatever he'd get in, but it's never been a negative term, but apparently he feels differently. He doesn't like being bubbed per se.
I'm not your bub. So good. So good.